Hey there, everybody. Well, there's been a lot of talk about EVs and politics. And it seems like EVs have always been political, and I don't really know why that is, because they're just cars. And this channel has always, and indeed, if you follow me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it now, at Tesla Pittsburgh, I've always viewed this as a car. It is an electric car, but it is a car. In fact, that was one of the primary requirements before we bought it, and part of the reason we took a while to do so was that it had to function first as a car. That was the rule. It had to be a functional car we could take on trips, we could use to go to Home Depot, haul the kids, all the things. That was job number one. And so here we are. When we bought it, part of the reason we bought it gray is because at the time we purchased this car, it was considered to be on one side of the political spectrum to own one. And that's not why we bought it. We bought it because we wanted the performance and the reliability, hopefully, of an electric car. Having said that, over time, this car is over a decade old and not quite to 130,000 miles. And now the pendulum has shifted the other way, and it has become political the other way to own this car, which, again, I just don't understand why what powers a car is such a big deal to so many people. But be that as it may, there is this notion out there of some kind of electric mandate. So let's talk about it, the electric mandate. I don't think that there needs to be so much drama related to these mandates because, as far as I know, there is not actually a national electric EV mandate. And the suggestion that we're going to somehow get away from the EVs being required by changing whoever's in the presidency is kind of silly, because where there are mandates, they're being imposed by the manufacturers on themselves. They're being imposed by foreign governments, which we don't have influence over in the U.S., not to that level anyway. And where there are EV mandates being imposed in the U.S., they're being done by state and local governments, which last time I checked was the same justification being used for other, we'll say, unpopular policy decisions that were being made, that it was best left to the states, best left to the locals to decide. So I don't know what the presidency has to do with EVs, but that's a whole nother thing, as I discussed. But there was news today about an EV mandate in New Jersey, where they said that by 2035 they would not allow the sale of new gas cars in the state of New Jersey. Now, you could go outside the state lines and buy a gas car and bring it back into New Jersey, no problem. You could buy a used gas car and register it in New Jersey, no problem. They just weren't going to allow the sale of new gas cars after 2035. Oh my gosh, the uproar that I see online about that. But again, I'm a car guy, and I'm in a 10-year-old EV. And I've never been bashful about talking about the pros and cons of my experience with this car, and apparently the whipsaw politics of what is associated with this car over the years. Having said that, we go back to, well, it's just a car, right? So it's a tool. And I always say that you need to use the right tool for the right job. And the question becomes, everybody's all upset about the possibility of not buying a new gas car 11 years from now. 11 years from now. That's a pretty long time. That's longer from now than I've owned this car, and this car is considered practically an antique among electric vehicles. So if we consider what a new version of this car can do versus what this car can do, I mean, They're worlds apart. Now imagine what happens to that car in another 11 years. And I don't care who makes it, just imagine what the technology and the cost structure is going to be and the infrastructure available in another 10 years. You know, I bought this car, there weren't any superchargers really to take trips out of Pittsburgh. They were building them as our car was being built. That is still amazing to me that we just happened to get it as the network in our area grew to allow us to stretch out our legs. Another decade? I mean, it's an awful lot of fear and concern about a problem that's not going to exist. So here's where my opinion is on that. What are the shortcomings of EVs today? Well, range is a concern. That's a legitimate concern most of the time. But if you have charging set up in your house, you at least have the potential of having full range every morning when you leave. As the owner of 2 other cars that run on gas, I can assure you that every day that those cars leave the property, they don't have their full range available to them. In fact, they tend to have a lot less, especially when certain members of my family drive, and then I go to use their car and I have range anxiety because there's lights on that shouldn't be on telling me that I need to stop soon. That's a whole nother thing. You know who you are. So if you always have full range available when you wake up in the morning, daily range isn't a problem. Electric cars have already solved that. Okay, well, refilling that range, well, you got 2 options. Fast charging, which takes longer than gas, still, in 10 years, maybe not. We don't know. Or slow charging, destination charging, if you don't have the ability to charge at home. Now, I tell people now, don't buy an electric car. You can't charge where you sleep. As a runner-up, charging where you work might be an okay option, assuming a lot of things. But of course, as soon as everybody in your workplace gets EVs, you don't get a charger every day. Or if you lose your job, you don't get a charger. Or, I don't know, you decide to go on vacation. You want some time off? Well, you're going to go to work to charge? It's silly. So I highly advocate that today, don't buy an electric car if you can't charge it where you sleep. That's the one thing you know you're going to do every day is sleep. So charge your car while you're sleeping. Get a plug in your house. Get a charger somewhere, you know, in your apartment complex or whatnot. Now, I think in 10 years that will become more of an amenity and more common for those people that do live in apartments. But right now, that is a legitimate concern. Can I charge it where I sleep? And if you mandated the lack of alternatives right now, that would be foolhardy because there's a lot of people that can't charge where they sleep, and it's not in their power to change that. So, you know, renters are that's an issue. Legit. It's a concern right now. The other shortcoming of EVs is when you're traveling, that fast charger. Is the network built out to the point where the average person who owns an EV can go where they want to go without compromise and use it like a normal car? And we're talking any brand. And that can be their only vehicle. Nah, we're not quite there yet. In fact, we're quite a ways from being there, if we're honest. I mean, even with the Tesla, there have been a number of trips where, because of where the chargers are located, and again, this car is a decade old, because of the limitations of this specific car, we have taken gas cars because for those jobs, for those tasks, that was the right option. That was the fastest way to do things. Construction season. I just love it so much. Anyway, so there still exists today, even among the Tesla folks who are rational and reasonable, a need to sometimes take a gas car, or that a gas car would be better from a simple transportation standpoint. They'll go on and on about, yeah, but then you have to drive it, and you know, my Tesla drives itself, and you know, yeah, whatever. We're talking about the ability to move human bodies from one place to another. I don't care how you're doing it as far as your interactivity with the car or not. Can the vehicle itself do it, and what's the best way for that vehicle to do it? And it doesn't matter what it's fueled by, at that point, or it's just, it doesn't matter whether it does it by itself or whether you have to do it. The issue is, can it actually do it? And in that regard, there's still room for improvement for electric vehicles, and there's going to be. And that's just the reality of things. Right now, Teslas are the best at it, but they're not the only game in town, as we know. And there are holes in the network, as we know. And so that's a valid point now. However, in 11 years, and in New Jersey, have you seen how many superchargers are in New Jersey? Go to the supercharger. Just do this. Go to the supercharger map and just look at where the superchargers are state by state. Now, if you were in Wisconsin or something, or South Dakota, you might have, or frankly, Pennsylvania, we've got some pretty big holes. But in New Jersey, there's a lot of places to charge in New Jersey. And in 10 years, and again, if you're in New Jersey, you should be charging at home if you have a home. That's a whole other thing. Anyway, so that is a valid criticism. Now, the other big drawback is the replacement of the batteries. We are not to the point yet where replacement batteries are inexpensive. And in fact, I would argue that that's getting worse as we make, or as some companies make replacement batteries a structural part of the car. If it's a structural part of the car, you can't replace the battery without replacing the car. So that's kind of a big problem. And I'm not a fan of that, I really question that from a long-term durability, serviceability point of view. But again, in 10 years, now I don't believe the battery prices have fallen very much in the previous 10 years, but I feel like there's more and more people doing more and more research and more production, and by people I mean companies, and we're going to have, hopefully in 10 years, a very huge shift in the cost of battery packs, battery cells, and the ability to service them and things like that. So I'm going to say the jury's out on that one as well. But anyway, so I don't like necessarily that we have to get to the point of EV mandates. I go back to what the argument was that I try to tell folks is like, knowing how good EVs are now for most of the driving, most of the time it is the right tool for many people, not for most people. I wouldn't say for most people even, but for many people it's the right tool, and there aren't really any compromises. When I look forward another decade as to all the technological and infrastructure changes that will come in that amount of time, you're not going to want a gas car. You're just not, and I'm a car guy, but you're not going to want a gas car. It's going to be a huge hassle to have to go someplace to fill it up. And then all the other maintenance items that a gas car needs that these just don't. You're not going to want one. So don't fear the future.